There is a specific kind of evidence that is difficult to explain away. Not one person, not two. Every single person who has spent the night in a specific place across years and decades of separate visits reporting the same thing, the same sound, the same smell, the same figure in the same corner, the same dream, the same feeling of being watched from the same direction at the same time of night. These are not haunted house stories. These are documented patterns, accounts from people who had no prior knowledge of what others had reported, who described their experience in their own words and produced descriptions that match, detail for detail, the descriptions of everyone who came before them. In this video, we count down 13 Japanese places where every person who has spent the night reports the same experience. Stay with me to the end, because number 1 involves a visitor who appears in every account, described identically by everyone, and has never been identified. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us begin. A former ryokan in the northern outskirts of Kyoto, closed since the 1970s and subsequently used as short-term accommodation by various owners, has accumulated a specific pattern in visitor accounts. Every person who has spent the night there reports waking at approximately 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the wooden corridor outside their room. The footsteps follow the same path, from the north end of the corridor to a specific room 3 doors from the south end, and stop there. The room they stop at has been sealed since the 1970s. At a ruined temple structure in the mountains north of Niko, overnight visitors, researchers, hikers, and urban explorers who have camped at the site across different seasons and different decades consistently report the same smell. Incense, specific and strong, in a structure that has had no human activity for decades. No incense has been found at the site. In the agricultural interior of Hokkaido, an isolated farmhouse that has been uninhabited since the 1980s has been used intermittently by travelers and researchers as overnight shelter. Every person who has spent the night there reports the same auditory experience. Between midnight and 2 a.m., the sound of a child crying begins in the eastern room of the house and continues for between 20 minutes and an hour before stopping completely. The eastern room of the house is a small room that former residents described as a child's room. There is no structural explanation for the sound. No animals are documented in the house. No plumbing or heating system is active. No wind pattern produces that particular sound in that particular room. Sound engineers who have visited the house during the reported hours have documented the experience. Their equipment has not captured what they heard. In the industrial district of western Osaka, a former textile factory that has been partially redeveloped but retains an original building from the pre-war period has accumulated accounts from overnight security staff, urban explorers, and researchers who have spent time in the original structure. Every account describes the same figure. A woman standing at the window of the 3rd floor at the northeast corner of the building, visible from the exterior, not visible when the 3rd floor is accessed. The figure is described consistently across accounts, standing, facing outward, not moving, by people who had no knowledge of previous accounts when they made their own observations. The 3rd floor, northeast corner of the original building was the location of the factory's supervisory office during the pre-war period. Records indicate the office was occupied by a senior supervisor who died in the building during the 1945 air raids. On the northern coast of Aomori Prefecture, a former fishing family's house that has been unoccupied since the 1990s has been used as occasional overnight shelter by travelers on the coastal route. Every person who has spent the night there reports the same dream. Not a similar dream. The same dream. A boat returning to shore in darkness. A figure on the dock waiting. The figure turns. The dreamer cannot see the face. They wake up. The time is always between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. The fishing house faces a dock that was used by the family who last occupied it. The dock is no longer in use. The accounts come from people of different ages, different backgrounds, and different levels of belief in anything paranormal. They describe the dream in different words. The dream they describe is the same dream. In the older districts of central Tokyo, a building that served as a minor administrative and judicial function during the Edo period and survived subsequent development as a heritage structure, has been used for events, exhibitions, and overnight research stays. Every person who has spent the night in the building reports the same physical sensation, a specific cold that begins in the lower back and moves upward along the spine between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., lasting approximately 10 minutes before dissipating completely. The sensation is described as cold that moves, not ambient cold, not draft cold, but cold that has direction and progress. The building has been assessed by multiple HVAC engineers following multiple reports of the sensation. No air movement pattern, no thermal condition, and no structural feature has been identified that produces cold with the specific characteristics reported by every overnight visitor. In the forested hills surrounding Nara, a small shrine complex that is no longer actively maintained sites at the end of a path that branches from a more frequently visited trail. Overnight visitors, hikers who have camped at or near the shrine across different seasons and years, consistently report the same experience. At some point during the night, they become aware that they are not alone, leave the site without understanding why they left, and find themselves on the main trail with no memory of the walk from the shrine. The experience is consistent not in its details, but in its structure. Every person who has reported it describes the awareness, the departure, and the gap in memory in the same sequence. None of them report fear. They report certainty. A specific, calm certainty that they needed to leave, followed by the absence of the journey. Beneath a building in central Hiroshima, a wartime underground shelter that was incorporated into the building's basement during post-war construction has been accessible to researchers and building staff. Every person who has spent significant time in the shelter, overnight stays, extended research sessions, reports the same auditory experience. Voices speaking in Japanese, heard clearly enough to recognize as voices, but not clearly enough to identify words. The voices are described consistently as multiple, never one, always several, and as occupying the space rather than coming from a direction. The shelter was in use during August 1945. The specific events that occurred in it during that period are not fully documented. Sound engineers who have spent the night in the shelter have recorded ambient conditions consistently. The recordings contain no voices. The engineers present when the recordings were made heard the same voices every other overnight visitor has reported. In the mountains of Miyagi Prefecture, a former hunting lodge that has been used as occasional overnight accommodation by hikers and researchers has accumulated a specific pattern across visitor accounts. Every person who has spent the night there wakes to find that something in the room has been moved. Not dramatically. A cup placed closer to the edge of a table, a boot turned to face a different direction, a bag moved to a position the visitor does not remember placing it. The movements are small. They are also consistent. Visitors who have stayed multiple times report the same type of movement each time. Visitors who set deliberate traps, items positioned precisely and photographed before sleep, have produced photographs that document the movement. No person has been present to produce the movement. The photographs show the before. The morning shows the after. The in-between has not been documented. In southern Okinawa, a tunnel system used during the Battle of Okinawa in 1945 has been partially accessible to researchers and historians for documentation purposes. Every person who has spent extended time in the accessible sections, overnight stays for research, extended documentation sessions, reports the same physical experience. A specific pressure felt equally across the entire body that begins gradually and increases until the person leaves the tunnel and dissipates immediately upon exit. The pressure is described consistently as not painful, but as oppressive in a specific way, a weight that is felt rather than measured. Pressure sensors placed in the tunnel during documented sessions have not recorded pressure differentials that would produce the physical sensation every visitor reports. The tunnel is structurally sound. The pressure felt by every person who stays is not in the structural data. A former elementary school in Fukuoka Prefecture closed in the 1980s following the area's population decline has been the subject of urban exploration and occasional overnight research. Every person who has spent the night in the building reports the same experience at some point between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. A child's voice calling a name from the direction of the former music room. The name is different in every account, but the voice is described the same way. Young, female, calling once, not repeated. The former music room is on the second floor at the end of the east corridor. It has been assessed structurally and acoustically. No sound source that would produce a child's voice calling from that room has been identified. Every overnight visitor hears it. Every overnight visitor describes it the same way. Every one of them hears a different name. On a rocky headland on the Wakayama coast, a lighthouse that has been automated and unmanned since the 1970s has been used as occasional overnight accommodation by coastal researchers and photographers. Every person who has spent the night in the lighthouse, keeper's quarters, reports the same visual experience. A light on the water, visible from the lighthouse windows, that moves slowly from north to south along the horizon, takes approximately 40 minutes to complete the movement, and then disappears. No vessel navigation pattern produces the light's specific behavior. No navigational chart explains the route the light follows. The light has been photographed. The photographs show nothing at the location where it was observed. The experience is consistent enough across overnight visitor accounts that researchers who have stayed specifically to document the light have arrived, seen it, and left with photographs that show an empty ocean. In a remote mountain village in Nagano Prefecture, a farmhouse that has been uninhabited since the 1960s has been visited by researchers, historians, and occasional travelers. Every person who has spent the night there reports the same visitor. Not a sound, Not a figure, not a feeling. A visitor. A specific person, described consistently across every account from every overnight visitor who has ever stayed. An elderly man, sitting in the main room, who looks directly at the overnight visitor when they wake during the night, holds their gaze, and is gone when the visitor looks again. Every account describes him the same way. Every account describes the same expression on his face. Not threatening, not welcoming. Patient. As though he has been waiting for a long time and is accustomed to waiting. Nobody has identified him. Every overnight visitor has seen him. He is always the same.